Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. The signal. I've always been a night owl. That's why the overnight shift at Blackwater Weather Station suited me perfectly. Perched on the edge of the Alaskan wilderness, it was just me, the equipment, and the endless night sky for company. The pay was excellent, hazard compensation for the isolation, they said, and the work was straightforward. Monitor atmospheric conditions, maintain the equipment, and relay data back to headquarters in Anchorage. 3 weeks on, 1 week off. That was the arrangement. I've been at Blackwater for almost 2 years when things started to change. Small things at first, equipment powering on when I'd shut it down, lights flickering in sequences that seemed almost deliberate. I blamed it on the aging infrastructure. The station had been built in the 1970s, and while the monitoring equipment had been updated over the decades, the electrical system was original. Finicky at the best of times, downright temperamental during the winter months. But on that particular night, January 17th, I couldn't blame what happened on old wiring. I was in the communications room, finishing up my nightly report. Outside, a blizzard howled, winds clocking in at nearly 60 miles per hour. The station creaked and groaned under the assault, but I'd grown accustomed to the sounds. What I wasn't accustomed to was the radio crackling to life on its own. Static at first, then a voice, distant, distorted. "Help us, please, we're still." I froze, coffee mug halfway to my lips. The radio was tuned to the emergency channel, standard protocol during severe weather, but no one should be broadcasting. Not in this storm, not in this remote location. I set down my mug and reached for the transceiver. "This is Blackwater Weather Station. Please identify yourself and state your emergency." Nothing but static answered me. I tried again, adjusting the frequency slightly, thinking perhaps I'd picked up a stray transmission from a passing aircraft or a distant station. "This is Blackwater Weather Station. Do you copy? Over." The static cleared for just a moment. "Been here since. Can't leave, please." Then nothing. The radio went dead, not just silent, dead. The power indicator light extinguished as though someone had cut the power. I checked the connections, toggled the power switch, but nothing happened. That's when I noticed the temperature in the room had dropped dramatically. My breath clouded in front of my face. The thermostat on the wall read 38 degrees F, down from the usual 68 degrees F. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the utility room to check the heating system. The hallway was darker than usual, the overhead lights dimmer than they should be. Power fluctuations weren't uncommon during storms, but this felt different, deliberate somehow. The utility room door was closed. I distinctly remembered leaving it open earlier when I'd gone in to check the generator's fuel level. I reached for the handle, and my hand recoiled instinctively. The metal was ice cold. I pulled my sleeve over my hand and turned the handle. The door swung open to reveal the utility room in perfect order. The generator hummed steadily, all systems nominal, but the cold, it was even more intense in here. I could see frost forming on the metal surfaces, and there was something else. A smell, faint but unmistakable, like ozone and something else, something organic, decay perhaps. I checked every gauge, every readout. Nothing indicated a malfunction. According to the equipment, the heating system was running at full capacity, but the room remained frigid. Back in the communications room, I tried the radio again, still dead. I moved to the backup system, a satellite phone reserved for emergencies. No signal. The storm was likely interfering with the transmission. I was effectively cut off from the outside world until the weather cleared. Standard procedure in such situations was to maintain the station, document any anomalies, and wait it out. I'd done it before, but never with the feeling that I wasn't alone. I made a circuit of the station, checking each room methodically. The cold seemed to follow me, intensifying whenever I stopped moving. The lights continued to dim and brighten at irregular intervals. In the kitchen, I found all the cabinet doors open, though I was certain I'd closed them after dinner. Back at my desk, I pulled up the weather monitoring systems. The external cameras showed nothing but swirling snow, the visibility near zero. But the meteorological data was off. The barometric pressure readings were fluctuating wildly, dropping to levels that should have been impossible at our elevation. The wind direction indicators were spinning in patterns that defied the laws of physics, showing winds coming from all directions simultaneously. And then I saw it, on camera 3, which monitored the north approach to the station. A figure standing motionless in the blizzard, humanoid but wrong somehow, too tall, too thin. And despite the raging storm, it appeared perfectly still, as though the wind and snow passed through it rather than around it. I blinked and it was gone. I rewound the footage, nothing, just snow and darkness. I must have imagined it. Isolation plays tricks on the mind, that's what they told us during training, especially during the long winter months when daylight is scarce. The radio crackled again, making me jump. This time the voice was clearer. "We've been waiting for someone to hear us." I snatched up the transceiver. "Who is this? Identify yourself. You know who we are, Marcus." "You've always known." My blood ran cold. I hadn't told them my name. "How do you know my name? Where are you transmitting from?" "We're here with you. We've always been here." The lights in the room went out completely, plunging me into darkness. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. In the pitch black I heard something. A soft, rhythmic sound, like breathing but not quite, more mechanical, like the wheezing of old bellows, and it was coming closer. I fumbled for the desk drawer where I kept spare batteries. The darkness was absolute, but I knew the layout of the room by heart. My fingers closed around a cylindrical object, a battery. I quickly replaced the ones in my flashlight and it sputtered to life, casting a weak beam around the room. There was nothing there, but the breathing sound continued, now seeming to come from all around me. The temperature had dropped further. Ice crystals were forming on the windows, spreading in intricate patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Symbols, perhaps, or words in a language I couldn't read. I made my way to the main control room, where the emergency generator controls were located. If I could bypass the main electrical system, maybe I could restore full power to the station. The door to the control room was ajar, a sliver of dim light spilling into the hallway. I pushed it open slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. What I saw inside defied explanation. All the monitoring equipment was on, screens glowing, lights blinking, dials turning, but the displays showed impossible readings. Outside, temperatures of -200 degrees F, wind speeds approaching 300 mph, and on the main screen, a radar image that showed not the expected storm system, but a perfectly symmetrical spiral pattern, like a massive fingerprint centered exactly on Blackwater Station. And standing before the main console was a figure, not the tall, thin shape I'd glimpsed on the camera. This was different. A man in what appeared to be an old-fashioned weather service uniform, his back to me. But there was something wrong with the way he stood, too still, too rigid, and his outline seemed to waver slightly, like heat distortion above hot asphalt. "Hello," my voice came out as barely a whisper. The figure didn't turn. Didn't acknowledge me at all, but the radio on the console crackled to life. "They told us it would only be for 6 months, the voice said, the same voice from earlier. "A special assignment, classified." "Top priority." I took a step closer, flashlight beam focused on the figure. "Who are you?" "We were the first team, 1976. Blackwater wasn't a weather station then." "Not really." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "What do you mean?" "They built it to listen, not to the weather, to what's beyond." The figure began to turn, slowly, mechanically. I wanted to run, to look away, but I stood frozen, watching. "We heard it. After 3 months we heard it, and it heard us back." The figure completed its turn and I stifled a scream. Where a face should have been was a blank expanse of skin, featureless except for a single vertical slit where the mouth should be. The slit opened as the radio spoke. "It's still listening, Marcus." "Always listening." The lights flickered violently, and when they stabilized, the figure was gone. But the equipment remained active, the impossible readings still displayed on the screens. With trembling hands, I accessed the station's database. There had to be records, information about the station's history, something to explain what I'd just seen. The database was extensive but heavily redacted, entire sections blacked out or deleted entirely, but there were fragments. References to Project Blackwater dating back to the mid-1970s. Scientific papers with titles like Long-Wave Radio Propagation Through Non-Standard Atmospheric Conditions and Theoretical Models for Transdimensional Signal Processing. And there were personnel files. Most were redacted, but one caught my eye. Incident Report, January 17, 1977. Exactly 45 years ago to the day. The report was brief and heavily censored. Following redacted event, all personnel at Blackwater Station are presumed redacted. Search and rescue operations were terminated after 7 days due to redacted conditions. Station was redesignated as Standard Meteorological Outpost in accordance with cover story. All equipment related to project redacted to remain on site but deactivated. Annual inspection to verify containment protocols. Containment protocols, what were they containing? The last line of the report sent ice through my veins. Under no circumstances should primary array be reactivated. Primary array. The old antenna system on the roof. It had been there when I arrived, but I'd been told it was obsolete equipment left over from the station's early days. Non-functional, just too expensive and difficult to remove given the station's remote location. But I'd seen the maintenance logs, regular inspections, power still routed to the system. If it was obsolete, why maintain it? A loud hum suddenly filled the station, the lights brightening to an almost painful intensity. On every screen, the same spiral pattern pulsed, growing larger with each iteration. and through the speakers came a sound that wasn't a voice, wasn't even sound as I understood it. It was like the concept of sound itself had been twisted, forced into a configuration that human ears were never meant to process. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just in the air, it was in my head, resonating through my skull, down my spine, into every cell of my body. And with the sound came knowledge, images, understandings that my mind struggled to contain. I saw the first team. 5 men and women, scientists and military personnel. I saw them activating the array, sending signals into the upper atmosphere. I saw what answered them, not from our atmosphere, not from our world at all. I saw what happened to them, how they changed, how they became something else, something that wasn't quite human anymore. And I saw how they merged with the station itself, becoming part of its systems, its walls, its very foundation. The sound stopped abruptly, leaving me gasping on the floor. The screens returned to normal, showing standard weather data. The lights dimmed to their usual intensity, but I knew now, I understood what Blackwater really was. Not a weather station, but a doorway, a point of contact with something from beyond our reality, something that had been reaching through little by little for decades. And tonight, January 17th, was when the door opened widest. I had to shut it down, had to find whatever this primary array was and make sure it stayed deactivated. I pulled up the station schematics, looking for anything that might help me identify it. There it was. A separate power system, isolated from the main grid, leading to a section of the roof I'd never accessed. A locked door at the end of the east corridor that I'd always assumed was storage. I grabbed my keys and headed there at a run. The cold intensified as I approached, frost coating the walls, my breath forming clouds that hung in the air unnaturally, not dissipating but coalescing into shapes that seemed almost deliberate, watching me. The door was steel heavy with multiple locks. My master key worked on the first lock, but the second required a code. I tried the standard station emergency codes, nothing. Then I remembered the date from the report. 1:17:77. I punched it in. The lock clicked open. Beyond the door was a narrow staircase leading up. Emergency lights cast a red glow over everything, giving the metal stairs the appearance of being coated in blood. I ascended slowly, the temperature dropping with each step until it was well below freezing. At the top was another door, this one with a radiation warning symbol. I hesitated, then pushed it open. I found myself in a dome-like structure atop the station. The walls were transparent, not glass, but some kind of advanced polymer that offered a clear view of the storm raging outside. But it wasn't the view that held my attention. It was what stood in the center of the room, a device unlike anything I'd seen before. Part antenna, part particle accelerator, part something I couldn't even begin to identify. It hummed with power, blue-white energy crackling along its length, and it was pointed straight up into the heart of the storm. But the storm wasn't natural. From this vantage point, I could see that the clouds formed a perfect spiral, with the station at its center. And at the apex, directly above the antenna, was an opening, not in the clouds but in the fabric of reality itself, a tier through which something was emerging. I couldn't look at it directly. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. But I caught glimpses in my peripheral vision, tentacles perhaps, or branches, or mathematical equations given physical form. It shifted and changed, never settling on a single shape or dimension. And it was coming through, coming here. The antenna was pulling it through. I had to shut it down. I frantically searched the room for controls, for a power switch, for anything that would stop this. There was a console near the base of the antenna, covered in dust except for fresh fingerprints. Someone had been here recently, had activated this thing. The console was complex, the labels in a script I didn't recognize, but there was one large switch marked with a universal symbol I did understand: power. I reached for it, but my hand stopped inches away, frozen in place by a force I couldn't see. "We wouldn't do that if we were you, Marcus." The voice came from behind me. I turned to see them, the first team. 5 figures arranged in a semicircle, blocking the exit. They appeared human at first glance, but wrong in subtle ways. Joints that bent at impossible angles, skin that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Eyes that reflected light that wasn't there. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," one said, a woman or what had once been a woman. "This was always the plan, from the very beginning." "What plan?" I managed to ask, my voice strangled in my throat. "Evolution, ascension, the next step." Her mouth didn't move when she spoke, the words simply appeared in my mind. "We've been preparing for decades, sending the signals, establishing the connection, and now it's ready. Ready to come through completely." What are you bringing here? Not bringing, becoming." She gestured to the tier above. "It's not a visitor, Marcus, it's what we will all become, what everything will become." Reality reshaped. I looked back at the antenna, at the pulsing energy traveling up its length. "You're insane. This will kill everyone." Not kill, transform, as we were transformed. She took a step toward me, her movement unnaturally fluid. We tried to make you understand, to prepare you, the dreams we sent, the signs, but you ignored them. Dreams. I had been having strange dreams since arriving at Blackwater, dreams of falling through endless space. Of voices speaking in languages I didn't know but somehow understood. They hadn't been dreams at all, they had been trying to communicate with me. Why me? I asked. Why now? You're receptive, compatible. As we were, she was closer now, close enough that I could see the wrongness of her eyes, pupils that expanded and contracted in patterns that had nothing to do with light. And the time is right, the alignment perfect. It only happens once every 45 years, the moment when the boundary is thinnest. I glanced at the console again. The power switch was right there, if I could just reach it. It won't work, she said, reading my thoughts. The process has already begun, energy has been exchanged, the boundary is dissolving. As if to emphasize her point, the tier above widened, the edges of reality peeling back like the skin of a fruit. Through it, I caught a glimpse of somewhere else, not space as I understood it, but a realm of pure mathematics and impossible geometry, and things moving within it, vast, incomprehensible things. One of them noticed me looking, turned its attention toward me. I felt its regard like a physical weight, crushing me, dissecting me, understanding me in ways I could never understand myself. And it reached for me, not with a limb or appendage, but with its mind, its will. I felt it touch my consciousness, and my mind began to unravel. I saw everything, the true nature of reality, the thin veneer of what we call existence laid over an infinity of other states, other possibilities. I saw time not as a line, but as a vast, multidimensional construct, with every moment existing simultaneously. I saw myself not as a discrete entity, but as a pattern, a temporary arrangement of matter and energy that had existed before and would exist again in countless variations. And I saw what it wanted, not destruction, not conquest, simply union, the dissolution of boundaries, the merging of all things into a single, perfect state of being. It was beautiful, terrifying, but beautiful. For a moment I wanted to surrender to it, to become part of something greater than myself, greater than humanity, greater than existence as I understood it. But then I remembered who I was, what I was, human, limited, yes. Flawed certainly, but real, and this obliteration of selfhood, this cosmic dissolution, would mean the end of everything human. With a cry that was as much mental as physical, I tore myself free from its influence. The former team members moved toward me as one, their forms shifting, melting together into a single entity of flowing flesh and too many limbs. I lunged for the console, my hand closing around the power switch. The amalgamated entity reached for me, pseudopods of not quite matter stretching across the room. I threw the switch. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The antenna's hum rose to a shriek. The blue-white energy turned red, then ultraviolet, then shifted into colors I had no names for. The tier above began to contract, the edges knitting together like a wound healing at impossible speed. The entity screamed not with a voice but with reality itself. The very air vibrated with its rage and pain. It surged toward me, but too late. The antenna exploded in a burst of energy that should have killed me instantly. Instead, I found myself outside my body, watching as the dome shattered, as my physical form was consumed by otherworldly fire, as the entity was pulled back toward the rapidly closing tier. In that moment, suspended between states of being, I understood. The antenna hadn't just been a doorway, it had been a tether, an anchor point that kept the entity, kept them partially in our reality. By destroying it, I had cut that tether. The tier sealed with a final pulse of energy that rippled outward, distorting spacetime like a stone thrown into a pond. And then, silence, darkness. I was still there, still conscious, but without a body, without physical form. I drifted through the ruins of Blackwater Station, watching as the blizzard buried the evidence of what had happened here. Days passed, then weeks. Search and rescue teams came eventually, finding nothing but debris and snow, no bodies. No survivors, just another mysterious incident to be redacted, classified, forgotten. But I remained, bound to this place. Not as a ghost, I don't believe in ghosts, but as something else. A pattern of energy, perhaps, a quantum echo. Whatever I am, I'm still here, still watching, still waiting, because I know the truth now. They'll rebuild, they always do. Different name, different cover story, but the same purpose. And in 45 years, it will happen again. The alignment. The thinning, the attempt, I'll be ready. I'll be here to stop it, to warn whoever comes next. If you're reading this, if you've somehow found this record, then listen carefully. Blackwater isn't gone, it's just waiting, dormant. And January 17, 2022 is approaching fast. They'll try again. And this time they'll be more careful, more subtle. They've learned from their failures, but so have I. I'm still here, in the systems, in the walls. In the very air of this place, watching, waiting. The new station staff don't know I'm here, don't hear me when I try to warn them. but you might be receptive as I was, so listen for the signal, watch for the signs. And if you find yourself assigned to a remote monitoring station, whether seismic, astronomical, it doesn't matter what they call it, remember this: some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. Some doors should remain closed. And if you hear a voice on the radio when no one should be broadcasting, run.